It is Designing Music. I'm Zach Martin, along with Spencer Drate, Patrick Bamburak, and our guest today, Rob O'Connor from the UK. He's got a great site, stylerouge.co.uk, or in the UK, they would go .co.uk, I do believe. Fantastic artwork. And I think that when the people, when the viewer, when the listeners start to look and see some of the great designs that you've had over the years, they'll certainly recognize your work. So Rob O'Connor, welcome to Designing for Music as part of our new HD TV series. It's great to have you here.
Let me come on this first before Rob starts. We have this famous Blur leisure cover. This has been on our Art of Vinyl cover show site on YouTube, 12-inch and 7-inch, that Patrick Bamburak produced, and Zach is voiceover on, and Judith and I selected covers, really cool LP and 45 covers, and this cover is in it. And on our 10 interview HD TV series, we've represented Rob's artwork with Blur 45 and 12-inch in our series, and I just wanted to start with that.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be part of this. I'm kind of representing the opinions of several people, because Stylorouge is a company of several people. There's 3.5 of us at the moment, but there have been many more in the past, and it's always been a very collaborative thing. So a lot of the work I'll be talking about today is actually more the work of a group of people rather than an individual. But yeah, to go back to Blur, that was very important for us because we were reasonably busy, but when Blur came knocking, it was through their record company, Food Records, and we'd already done a couple of projects for them, one for a band called Diesel Part West, who I've always been very fond of, and Jesus Jones. And yeah, so we'd worked quite successfully with Jesus Jones, and they'd done quite well, and Blur came along, and that was a clean slate for us. As a blank canvas, we could do what we wanted, really. And as they got more successful, of course, they were more involved. But it was really good. That first cover you just picked up there, the oh, there's Jesus Jones. The leisure cover was actually we jumped over the major hurdles by that stage. The first thing they wanted was a logo, because they were putting the band on the road and they wanted to sell T-shirts and kind of promote the. Actually, I can do that one, Spencer. Yeah, actually, I can't do that one. I can do that one. This is Modern Life is Rubbish, which was the second cover.
So true.
Yeah, still rubbish. I've got a T-shirt with that saying "Modern Life is still rubbish." So yeah, they wanted a logo, as I say, and it was really tough because the record company kind of were their management as well at that point, and they really wanted it to get it right, because for once they wanted this band to have a logo. We'd been through a spell where the music industry kind of didn't make it that important to have logos. In America, it's been slightly different. In Britain, it was almost like we were too cool for school. The bands just wanted to have nice typography and what have you. And so for suddenly wanting a logo for Blur was quite different. And we tried to design a band logo, which is kind of what you do, isn't it? And what they ended up with, when they were finally happy, it actually looked more like a logo for a product. It looked more like a logo for a piece of electrical equipment or a washing powder or something. So, and I think that's what made it work. And I think that's why when they do release a record under the name Blur, they do still seem to use that logo. So, yeah. But the girl in the picture, which is the subject here, we'd already sort of got into the habit of using other imagery, other commercial imagery, and kind of misappropriating it, because these images weren't created for record covers. And the first thing we started using, I believe, was postcards. The more obscure and obtuse, the better. And there's a track called "There's No Other Way," which was on that very album, I believe. I can't remember. Right. Which is a baby in a bath, and that was what we used for that. I don't think I've got that with me either. Oh yes, I have. Yeah, there you go.
Well, that would be the 45, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
we showed that. Yeah, Rob, we showed that on our interview series. So the 45 with the eye going through the B of the blur, I think, on the 45.
that's correct. Yeah. I mean, for some reason, it caught people's imagination, but it set the ball rolling. It meant that we weren't. It appeared like we weren't being very creative, if I'm honest, because you're not actually making that image, but you're using it in a kind of wrong way, and somehow it fitting. And I think that kind of sense of mischief worked well for Blur. It seemed to make they were quite anti-establishment, and they were also a little bit anti-record industry. They weren't really that. They didn't want to play the game of doing all the usual promos and what have you. So yeah, I think that's why it probably worked, and we ended up working for them for 5 years or so.
You did Tears for Fears, Visions of Love cover. It's gorgeous. The Visions of Love cover.
No, it was Seeds of Love.
Seeds of Love. I'm sorry.
Seeds of Love. Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, I think I have that one here as well, actually, as it happens. Even though I said I wouldn't do this with, I believe I did.
Before we get to that, who came up with the typography for Blur? Because the minute you mention the group, it comes to mind the small case letters. And just that the way the Blur looks, just I automatically recognize it.
Yeah,
in my mind, it's there.
It was a kind of a joint effort. I think we distilled everything down to something very simple. As I was saying, in this country, there's a well, in fact, it's probably a worldwide company, Brother. They used to make typewriters and things, and they make office equipment. It's only since the logo became the Blur logo that we suddenly started realizing there were other brands out there with this the round B and very simple, almost 1970s style typography. So there was Brother. There was a product called Bounce, which is a sheet of sort of material.
The stuff that you throw in the dryer that makes it smell nice. Yeah,
that's
Bounce,
it.
right? Yeah,
even that looks similar. And since then, there's a product called Blue, which I think is one of those electronic cigarette products. And also Beats, the headphones, the B of the Beats. It feels a bit like the Blur logo. I'm not going to sue them. I think I might lose.
Well,
but
it's good. Don't you think, Rob, it's good to know that you've been inspired by various pieces of art and other artists, and that your work inspires other people as well?
I think that's incredibly important. I mean, that's one of the things. One of the first things we do when we start a project is to actually look and see what other people are doing, not just in the same area of the market, but art, advertising, TV, film, and just put things together to actually have a discussion with visual material in front of you, rather than just speak in the abstract. Generally we talk as a group, and often with the artists themselves. So we present a lot of visual stuff, and if we're inspired by other people's work, you're right, Zach. It's nice to think that if we come up with something that inspires other people, then that's cool too.
You go to stylerouge.co.uk and you see a wonderful world of colors, and it immediately pops out. The creation of the site pops out. And I'm just curious, when I look at the body of work and the color sequencing and the different styles that you employ, is it an easy process for you to go from point A to the finish, whatever that might be, point A to point Z?
I think it's a good question on two levels. One is I think it's very rare that anyone in the design industry ends up doing almost one thing and just one thing only. And when we were at our busiest, we were turning out quite a lot of record covers at one time, and it kind of amazed me that people would think, okay, well, we're going to this company here because they've done a record cover. But I'd almost feel like if I was them, I'd want to go somewhere else. I wouldn't want to feel like I was getting something that was secondhand. But that just doesn't happen, because every single project that comes up, you realize it's a different. All right, it's the same thing. You're packaging a piece of music, but at the same time, it's a completely different piece of music. It's a completely different person, different artistic instincts. It sounds different, and so on. So that's almost been the biggest challenge for us, to make sure everything feels like it's new and it's unique to that artist.
Right.
I want to bring up a point. When we were doing our Designing for Music book, of course, Rob is profiled in. At that time, they were and as an album cover designer myself and my partner Judith, we looked. Well, Rob brought up a good point. We always look at other designers, right, Rob? I mean, we look at other people's work. It tends to sometimes influence some ideas, things like that. But I just want to tell you, you're always on the top of the list with me when we put the book together. And of course, Vaughn Oliver's in it, and Malcolm Garrett, and some really great Martin Atkins. But you at that time were very quality, and you still are, and I really respect that. Your company has always been a quality company.
Thank you very much. I think the difference between ourselves and a lot of the other people who were busy at the same time was that we always felt like we were at the more commercial end of things, not always by choice. So we'd find that we'd get quite a lot of pop music to design for, or MOR rock music or whatever, and it always felt like I was a little bit jealous that we weren't getting the Cocteau Twins and the Wolfgang Press and all these wonderful bands that Vaughn had. But at the same time, he may have sometimes been jealous of what we were doing. Sure. Maybe sometimes because the budgets were better in those days for a band who were going to sell, 500,000 instead of 5,000. You just, the grass is always greener on the other side.
And in all fairness, Rob, and I'll go over to Spencer after this. In all fairness, you have done work with Squeeze, Jimi Hendrix, as well as Blur, and Crowded House is another one that comes that I can think of, and various others, and books and all of this kind of stuff. So I don't think that it's like orange and lemons. I mean, everybody has their artist. I certainly would go to you with a few projects if I had the chance to do so. That's for sure.
Good on you, Zach. Good on you.
Yeah. I want to talk about little finite things and these little things that usually don't get discussed. But before we get there, we'll go over to Spencer, because I know he's just chomping at the bit to make some observations and ask some questions.
Well, I was interested that you're talking about big groups. You were also involved with UB40, which was a very big power group, right, Rob?
Yeah. I mean, I think we started working for UB40 back in the 90s, and yeah, I mean, really, that was a result of a good working relationship with Virgin Records. We were working for quite a few Virgin acts at the time. The Maxi Priest, Johnny Hates Jazz, Simple Minds spring to mind. And UB40 just came along as a complete project in a way. And we worked a lot with Ali Campbell, the singer of UB40 since then. In fact, we just did the last UB40. I think I've got that here somewhere. Yeah, that's the last UB40 cover we did for them. Sorry, where are we? There we go. Yeah, that's actually working with an American illustrator who lives in Hawaii. And you're going to ask me his name, and I'm afraid I've forgotten it. I'm so sorry. Right. But yeah, I mean, it's quite nice working with bigger bands. It's difficult with UB40 at the moment because there are actually two UB40s out on the market at the moment. There's the Ali's.
There's competing UB40s, right? Now,
there are.
You've done work with Bob Marley, Crowded House, and then there's the Cornbury Music Festival, which had Squeeze, Echo and the Bunnymen, and Elvis Costello that I'm seeing here. That's really cool. Wow. And then he did something for Island Records, it looks like. Why don't you talk about those? Because that's different when you're trying to encapsulate all of these different musical personalities and put them on one poster for a rock festival. Do you think
Yeah.
that that's real a challenge for most designers? Like, how do I take it,
Yeah.
put it all together?
Yeah, it's actually a challenge for everyone because every band who's got an identity, a brand identity, wants to use it, especially when they're on a bill with lots of other artists. They want to be seen as, you know, individual. And unfortunately, and we worked quite a bit now with festivals, and we've always recommended they don't use logos for bands because it becomes very messy. And it becomes a fight. I mean, it is anyway, because bands managers always want to, you know, they'll criticize the draft of the poster and say, I want my act to be bigger. And sometimes the logos just don't lend themselves to being big because they still don't look very powerful. So we do try, and with Cornbury, we've kind of made a big effort to brand the festival, not the bands. I mean, the bands are who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we try and give it. We still have at the moment. I do remember issues where, for instance, Van Morrison wanted to be top of the bill on the poster, but actually he wasn't playing top of the bill because he wanted to get away early. So, you know, you had these kind of arguments about who should be where, but it does. I mean, sometimes I do look at a bill, especially for people like Cornbury, who are quite a middle of the road festival and a very enjoyable festival, I must say, very comfortable, good toilets, good showers, good food. It's all wrong, really. But when you were told at the beginning of the year, right, this is the bill for this year's festival, you kind of look down it and think, blimey, you know, we work for so many of these guys, and even thinking back to Live Aid, the Live Aid at Wembley in London, we worked for so many of those people. It never occurred to me at the time. You know, Paul Young, Alison Moyet, Adam Ant.
Now, when you talk about your design and you get your team and you have all your colors and you have your typography and you kind of get the direction that you're going in, what I find in your art that's really interesting is that you have this wonderful way of dealing with exposure and contrast and brightness and saturation and vibrance. Is it something that you just, as you're making your production, do you just adjust it by sight and go, there you go, there you go, there you go, a little bit less, a little bit more? How does that happen? Because I think that is, if you're an amateur and you're trying to figure out that kind of those kind of machinations with a piece, I would like to hear from a master how you go in.
I don't think there's any golden rule. I mean, we're not shy of color. We love color, and yeah, if I could just quickly find things to show you to demonstrate that, it's something we really enjoy. Color, a lot of bright colors, not always appropriate to the project. I understand that, but no, we always enjoy that. I mean, that's the one thing sometimes that can turn a design from being okay, you know, to a fine tune on the color palette is really what sets it over the line and makes it a bit better. I mean, color palettes are quite difficult for artists and designers, I think. And one of my favorite little tricks for that, for what it's worth, is to find an image you already like, and it could be a photograph or a painting or whatever it is. Fortunately, if you've got Photoshop, you stick it in Photoshop, throw it out of focus, turn it into pixels, and you'd be amazed how easy it is to pick out 15 little colors and shades and tones that actually all work together, because there was something about that palette that. So we sometimes use tricks like that just to fine tune the color on something. But the thing you're referring to, Zach, I think is like, you know, when we all sit down and we talk about our ideas for something, because even if there's only half a dozen jobs on at one go that are pressing, we would still want to share our thought process with each other. It's not something, you wouldn't just do it in isolation and just get your head down and go, I don't want to hear from anyone else, this is my art. You know, we're very deliberately collaborative, and I think that's very important. You don't have to take notice of the other people's opinions, but I just think the sum of the parts has got to be worth more than just the whole.
Let me ask you a question, Rob, because in my life I've designed, for Talking Heads and Ramones and different groups like you. The thing I want to ask you is, have you worked with any groups that were very visual, like Talking Heads for me that I work with? It was incredible experience being a designer and their designers, or people with art, what I'm talking about, artistic heads. They know what you're doing. Have you worked with people like that were, your clients were very, I'd say, visual people that, what I'm saying? There was a working
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head who, I could say that really. Strangely, I might think of someone as I'm looking through things in a minute, but no. And I think that would be a really nice challenge for us. I mean, it feels sometimes like we're actually giving people the glamour, the artistic visual expression. And you're right. I mean, I'm sure on stage it's a different thing. Yeah, I'm sure people. But no, I wish it'd be nice to work with Talking Heads and like. We probably have worked with some artists that you've also worked for. That often happens. We're friends and peers. Like people like John Cale, for instance. I know you've worked with John.
Yeah.
And so that happens a lot. I mean, I'm quite often looking up who's the credits for certain covers that I have enjoyed in the past, and I thought, yeah, we work for these people. I wonder who did that. And it'll be, like Bill Smith or someone else who's the same era as me, and they've all done it. They all work for these people, and that's good, really. You can't take it personally.
Yeah, also I was thinking that when you do good quality design, and I think Judith and I have done that, we've never had problems with our clients, believe it or not, like Lou Reed or Joan Jett or whatever. And of course, you and your company, I think, have done incredible quality work. So you don't run into these problems, you might say, that maybe other designers that are not as adequate, in design might run into. Is that true? You know what I'm saying? Because you're so good at what you do.
No, I think we've run into a few problems.
Oh, you do? Really?
Yeah, I mean, you can really work your socks off on a project and get to the end where you've maybe done a couple of dozen visuals for something, and there are times when it's just never going to get through. You're never going to get it over the line. It just is one of those things. It's fortunately it's rare, and the asset of having a number of people with different creative styles always helps, because if it's not working normally, you can actually change horses and say, okay, someone else have a go at this project. But no, I think one thing about being a slightly more experienced or established company is that you feel like you get, I mean, I'm sure we've had some work given to us in the past because we're known to be reliable. Not just to deliver on time and deliver in the right formats and things, but also to actually come up with a solution that.
Well, I would say that you have to be reliable when you're giving a project like a Jimi Hendrix box set, which I have in my collection. Not here; it's in New York City, but this jukebox, and I know the logo, and it's on your site at stylerouge.co.uk, where you have Jimmy, and you use colors such as purple, black, and orange, and his face is orange. I like the use of orange and black in general.
Yeah.
I've grown accustomed to that. But why don't you take us through the process of how you ended up designing something for Jimi Hendrix? Now, you got to, anybody listening or viewing has to understand that Jimi Hendrix is the crown jewel of rock and roll. I mean, this guy was the most amazing guitar player in the history of humanity, and he's legendary. He serves in the United States Army. He breaks his ankle. He gets out, and he has basic conversation with a friend. They end up deciding to go into music. And at first, he doesn't do very well here in the United States, but goes over to the UK. And why don't you tell us what Jimi Hendrix means to people that like his genre of rock in the UK, and then how it went from there. and how you ended up designing this box set.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll start from the beginning, because about 2 years ago I was asked to choose a record and be on a panel at a book fair, of all things. Had nothing to do with books. I was on the same panel with 3 other music designers. One was Malcolm Garrett from Assorted Images, as it was in those days, and Jill Mumford, who designed the XTC logo, and various other things. And the whole point was we did like this thing that was like a jukebox jury. Now, I don't know if that's something that ever transferred to America, but in Britain growing up, jukebox jury was you had to sit down and talk about music as a panel, and that's what this was. And you had one record, that's it. You brought your one record, which was the track that made you decide at that point, I want to design record covers for a living. And Malcolm's was Hawkwind's In Search of Space, and mine was Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix. And when that record came out, I think I was about 16, so that kind of dates me. But it was also the year, I think, that Jimmy died. It was kind of a weird time, because it was him at his highest. I think the record got to #1 in Britain, or it was in the top 10. But it was huge for me, and I became a big Jimi Hendrix fan. And so years later, when someone asks, we were actually asked to work for Jimi Hendrix by Alan Douglas, who at that time was the owner of the the controller of the Jimi Hendrix estate. It hadn't at that point gone back to the family, and so we were involved in a number of projects. But the most important one at that time was an album called The Ultimate Experience, which was a double best of album. And it was really good, but it also involved an exhibition. And the exhibition was going to be a kind of semi-permanent exhibition in various cities. And in the States, it was going to be a traveling exhibition that went around in the back of a sort of 18-wheeler truck. Wow. and just turned up on student campuses and stayed there for 3 or 4 days, and then packed up and went off again. And it was a fantastic project. We also did a book for that. Actually, forgive me, I've got the book here. That's the book of the. It looks like the album cover, but it's and it's got some really beautiful artwork in it. This is interesting, isn't it? Opening a book backwards. How counterintuitive is this? There's just some beautiful artwork in here.
Oh, look at Jimmy,
prose and poetry and all kinds of things that people have written. And that was a beautiful book to be involved in. The thing about this was that we had a huge amount of imagery to work with. And this, the orange face, I have to admit, Zach, it's not us. This was a photograph by Gerard Mankiewicz, who's just one of the legends of rock photography. And he did a series of screen prints with a designer called David Costa. And it was David who put those colors in. If you like, the only victory we had here was that this project was so important to Universal Music. It went to what do they call it? Focus groups, market research. And we sat down in a meeting with the various high and mighty from Universal Music, and with Alan Douglas and Adrian Boot, who's another great photographer who was also, Adrian was involved in putting on the exhibition. And we were shown the picture that was going to be the cover because of market research. And it was a picture of Jimmy, bearing in mind he died when he was 27. And he's crouched over an acoustic guitar, black and white shot, wearing a hat. He could have been a 70-year-old blues guy. It was so wrong. It was so wrong. There was no psychedelia. There was no color. There was no rock. It was just, and we looked through all the other images and saw this one and just went, this is a no-brainer, and Alan agreed with us and threw his toys out the pram and said to Universal, you can't have this other picture, you just got to use this. And that's really the story of that. And we did the logo. I mean, that's just a bit of hand lettering that I did, and that sort of stuck through quite a few re-releases for a few years for Jimi Hendrix. But
was there anything that you learned that you didn't know about Jimi Hendrix when you started working on that project?
Probably a little bit. I mean, I was pretty keen. You know, I knew a lot about him anyway. And where our studio, one of our studios was in Paddington at one point. You know, it was only about 200 yards from where Jimmy was picked up in the ambulance on the night he died. You know, and so we knew quite a bit about him anyway. I think what I wasn't aware of was the amount of amazing imagery that was out there and the respect that he had from so many great artists. Yeah, so that was a good, I mean, it's a similar story to Bob Marley. You know, when I was at college, Bob Marley was way up there as one of my heroes. And then, you know, in 1981, literally the month he died, was the same month that I left Polydor Records to start Stylorouge. And one of the first jobs that came our way was a box set of all of Bob's vinyl albums. So it was a remarkable thing. A year or so before that, I'd been working at Polydor, and I was asked by Island Records if I would stand in because they were short of a player for a football match. Bearing in mind I hadn't played for about 6 years. And the reason I said yes was because Bob was supposed to be in the team, playing a bunch of bands that had their own teams. Spandau Ballet and Blue Rondo a la Turk and a few other people were in a band together, in a football team together. And Bob was not well, and this was just before he fell ill with the cancerous foot and what have you. And so obviously he didn't play, and I did, and I lasted about 11 minutes before I asked to come off. But to work with him is just phenomenal, you know, and it's great to work with some of the heroes that I've had in music.
Well, besides Jimi Hendrix and Bob Marley and Blur, another great group is Squeeze, one of my favorites. Yeah. You got to work with them. If you go to stylorouge.co.uk, it's part of the portfolio that you'll find where you have this one graphic of the human skull, and it's got various compartments in it, and it's really fascinating. What was the inspiration for that? Because it almost reminds me of you know, Monty Python meets Pink Floyd meets something else. I don't know.
No, it's Monty Python's a very good reference, actually. I mean, Squeeze, I sometimes think that if I'm inside any one band more than inside any one band's head more than any other, it's probably Squeeze, because I started working with them 30 years ago, and we started on a project called Cozy Fan Tutti Frutti, and that was for me, that was a real joy because I love Squeeze, and it was the beginning of a long relationship. When we got to the one you're talking about there, Zach, which is called The Knowledge, they didn't even have a title for the album, but I kind of understood where they were coming from visually. They love wordplay. They love having fun with music. I mean, if you're not careful with Squeeze, you can veer a little bit too far towards that comedy end of things, because the lyrics are generally funny or dry anyway. And you know, to go and see Squeeze is a really beautiful experience because the amount of people in the audience that actually probably know the lyrics better than the band themselves, and they all sing along. It's a terrific thing. So we in the back of my mind, there was something in a comic when I was a kid, which was called Numbskulls. It was a little comic strip with little people inside your head as the eye department, the brain department, and all this stuff going on. It's kind of like a piss take of one of those brain therapy heads, you know. And I showed this to them as an idea, and they loved it. And it it threw up the title, The Knowledge, as well, because it suggests the knowledge. And they're a very London band, and one of the great things about London is the black cabs. And to learn how to be a black cabbie you have to do the knowledge. That's what it's called. You do 4 years or something of studying maps of road maps of London. So it had quite a London centric kind of thing about it as well.
Well, I do believe that Spencer does have one of the Squeeze albums with him that he can show us.
I do not.
I thought you did. I thought you had a Squeeze. That was
That's
Patrick.
Yeah.
Pat has it. Pat has it.
Yeah. I think that's another one where I think that's another one where the image it sort of gave rise to the title, because they love the picture so much. It's a guy gurning, pulling his lips over his nose and whatnot.
You know what I like about that cover, Rob, is first of all, you've got lowercase letters and you've got different colors going on, as we were talking about before about color. And you have a beautiful array of color on that. That really makes the cover your eye go right to that cover,
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's simple, and sometimes holding back is
simplicity.
Well, sometimes it's difficult to do that.
It really is, because how do you decide on the colors? You just have a set of markers. You're like, oh, I got a purple one. Oh, look at this light blue one. Oh, this is an orange one. Yay, we're done.
You'll notice the last two colors are a kind of lavendery, pinky kind of color, if that's such a thing, and the lime green. And everyone in the office takes the mickey out of me because they're probably two of my regular favorite colors. But it is difficult. I mean, to get that through, when you put it this way, you'll get a budget from the record company for doing the job, and at the end of the day, you feel like you need to be giving your pound of flesh for that money. To come up with something that's really just so simple. It's the same with the Blur covers in a way. You feel like you've just done something so simple, but you've probably gone all the way around the houses to get there.
Well,
and it also scares people too. I've had clients that when you do something so simple, they can't accept it almost. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. So, they want something, but you've hit the mark though. And when you hit the mark, it kind of radiates, it gets by that whole thing, right, Rob? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's another example of that. I mean, that was the John Cale cover I was talking about, where we did a job for him. And the pictures that were supplied for that were so odd, really. It was only a couple of sheets of contact sheets, 35mm pictures, I think were taken by his girlfriend at the time, and the record company gave these pictures to us and said, what can you do with these? And I just thought, well, really, I don't know. And that's why we've this is a fogged negative, and it's just being used as a negative rather than a positive, for no other reason than we had to use it on the cover. Otherwise I'd have just had the typography.
Right.
But yeah, just going back to Squeeze, the other end of the scale with Squeeze is something like this, which was their not quite last album, their penultimate album, if you like. And this was a very different kettle of fish, because we wanted it to be a bit crazy, a bit like a psychedelic celebration of a weird London lifestyle. It's the same on the back. And again, you can see we're not shy of color, and then this was I don't know how we got the theme of the tickets, the train, but this was a photo shoot that I did myself with the guys down in Kent.
It's interesting because it's almost like their version of walking across Abbey Road.
I'm
sorry. Yeah, it's like they're doing their version of Abbey Road. Where the hell is Abbey Way? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's true. If it has that reference, and I think that's really good.
Now, with Squeeze or with any group, I think that sometimes you overdo it, or maybe go over the top on one, and then it all equals out where it's more simplistic the next time. And going back to the knowledge, you actually take at the top of the skull, in place of the brain, you have cauliflower, and then you split it like you're dissecting the brain. And then you've got things that most men will think about that's coming out of the cauliflower in the subject of girls. and photography. I mean, so that one's really complex. It's got a lot of meaning behind it. Then you have basically that Gotham City comic field from DC Comics in the back. I mean, that's a fantastic, thing to look at. It belongs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That's how good it is.
I totally agree, Zach.
Right? I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing piece. And then you have the one that you just showed us. What's the process as far as when you get into the design? And I'm going to ask the same question I ask everybody, Robert. Do you listen to the music before, during, or after? What is playing while you're doing your design?
No, it's generally we always get music before. I mean, the industry has been through phases where the bigger artists don't allow you to have access to the music because it's embargoed, and it used to get let out accidentally and all that kind of thing. Nowadays things have changed, and I think even the bigger artists are quite happy to have some music out there earlier because it feeds people's hunger for it. And typical nowadays to probably advertise an album being released 3 months hence, So, but for us, traditionally we would have the music and we would play it. And the worst thing that can happen is if someone gives you some tracks from the album and you really, really don't like it. And what we've always said is, let's just play some music that we think it should sound like, that we do like, and let that inspire us, because otherwise we're just never going to get over that hurdle of trying to work for something you don't like. And if we were working for foodstuffs, packaging food, and someone gave you a kind of a tin of tomato sauce with oysters in or something, you don't like it, you're just going to think this is a tough job. And with music, you just have to sometimes bite your tongue and say, let's get on and do the job.
I want to bring up a story about motivation. Judith and I worked on one project for a group called Saga, who had a very big hit called On the Loose. And CBS gave us this project to do their new album. And Rob, I got to tell you, this is a riot. The manager calls us up. We always listen to music, by the way, before we do a project, like you said. But the manager calls us up. Listen to this. He says, "This is the worst album we've ever done." So, in other words, before we're even starting, I get the picture. This album's going to be really bad. But we did a nice cover. But the motivation I'm bringing in, like the motivation to do covers. Here's an example of where the manager is telling you this album sucks, but then I go ahead as a designer, or me and Judith go ahead and progress with what we're trying to do, a really good design. Did you ever have something like that where you went into a project that maybe the music wasn't as good as you thought, but you're going to do the best thing in the world, of course?
Yeah. Oh, I think that happens a lot. I mean, we've done so many covers that inevitably I couldn't pick any out off the top of my head, but that's definitely the case. And the other way around, where you actually come up with something really good and you think, God, I wish that was actually for someone I liked more.
Right. I totally agree.
And if you're working for someone who actually isn't really in touch with what you want, and some of your best ideas get stuck, left on the side. For me, I always then assess, are they usable for someone else? I mean, not because I want to cheat and do something quickly and whatever. It's just that if you've sweated blood over something, you put it to one side because no one wants it. Right. It shouldn't just die. It should have another life. Yeah. So
that's a good point.
That has happened in the past. But,
it is an environmentally friendly thing to do, to repurpose stuff instead of throwing it out in the trash.
Especially good stuff.
It certainly is. Yeah.
And then maybe even making a separate piece into which it's just a I don't want to say but a piece of art that ends up on the wall, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? I would just say, hey, nobody else wanted it, and that would be the title. And I would put it up on the wall. Nobody else wanted it. make a
Yeah,
series.
absolutely.
Yeah, we're
Spencer,
Truth and I are working on a vinyl right now, which is outrageous. We have this cartoon. This is really going to be a knockout cover. But to be honest with you, we had a second idea, and he didn't like that idea, but we liked it. So we're thinking, just like Rob said, put it on the side, and we're thinking about using it for some group that it pertains to, and more of a definite, a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
do you, Rob, ever have somebody that comes to you and they want you to design a piece or do a campaign, and they have a list of things that they're looking for, and they hand it over to you, and you got to come up with something? How often does that happen? And when it does, is that frustrating or is it helpful?
No, I think I like that. I mean, at the end of the day, the record that you're packaging is not your record. It's someone else's, and they should have an involvement. I mean, I prefer it that way. In fact, if, on the other hand, they're dogmatic and they say this is exactly what we want, and you have no creative leeway at all, then I might change my mind about that. But I generally like the idea that we're part of their team and they're part of ours. And with Blur, for instance, that was always the case. As the more popular they became, the more pressure they felt to be involved.
Right.
I mean, you know yourself in the situation you're in, Zach, as a DJ. If you're interviewing an artist, the last thing you want to do is end up just resorting to asking them the same old questions. And one of them is often, so tell us about the record cover. And quite often they'll go, what about it? I don't know anything about it. So it's actually very good that the artist is involved. And if they do come to you, we've had some weird stuff. I mean, we worked for Sarah Brightman for many years, and I remember Sarah coming to us for a meeting and calling me up and saying, I want to talk about my cover idea, and I've got some ideas. And when she sat down and she just said, I think it should be red. And I just thought, okay, it will probably be red then. But yeah, we developed that conversation over an hour or two, and we ended up coming up with something that a week later looked really fantastic. And it without her involvement, it probably wouldn't have been a bright red, thing. So yeah, I like it when people come in with ideas. We always do what we call a style book or a mood board kind of approach. We always have done that, throwing textures, colors, typography, images we've seen, thoughts, notebooks, sketches, whatever it is. And there could be 40, 50 pages of stuff in these books. And once artists see them, obviously they don't, generally now they don't exist as books because we do them on computer and they become PDFs. But once we share them with people, the artists themselves can then go, oh, you know what? I think I can add a few things to this. And I generally like that kind of collaboration. It doesn't usually go wrong.
How many of you guys actually are really good at drawing, or what's some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the work you do? Spencer or Rob, why don't Rob go first and then Spencer?
Yeah.
I'm a bit old-fashioned. I really like the idea of being able to draw a bit. At the very least, I think, I can't remember who said this. There's a British designer from the 60s and 70s who actually said that, no one as a designer should be able to not be able to express an idea in 20 seconds with a piece of paper and a pencil. And in a way that's it's not something that I've lived by, but at the same time, I suppose I have without knowing it, because quite often if you get a notepad and a pen out in front of a client and you start to sketch something out, you can win them over. And half the time it's because if they like the quality of your hand, what you're doing, they feel reassured that, that they're in the company of someone who's visually creative. I know that sounds a bit shallow, but and if I see someone as a designer, and I've employed a lot of young designers over the years, and you give them a brief, or even teaching at colleges, which I have done, you give someone a brief and they go straight to their computer. And I can't get my head around that. I mean, I can if you're researching and so on, but if you're starting to make marks and it's in You know, it's very, I know I'm very old fashioned, but I think being able to draw just a little bit is really an asset.
Yeah, I want to add to that. We did a book called Foundations. It's all about upgrading traditional things around you, importing it and using it for book covers or record covers. And I got the idea going to lunch with Jeffrey Keaton, who was the head of MTV at that time. And he was going nuts at the table. He told me, Spencer, these kids, they're going to computer. They don't know about traditional design. And then we did this book on it. It's a beautiful book that Judith designed, actually. We authored for a company, for Watson Guptill, on famous designers that do that, import. And I think that's important what Rob's bringing up. I think people should get out of computers and see what's around you. Hello. I think that's very important. About sketching, I always like to sketch, especially logo design. I'm always doodling around, and even for covers, sometimes I'm thinking some way that this thing will formulate on the computer, you know, in some way. I'm always using the pencil and pad. I think it's very important. And I don't know, that's where I come from also.
I think the other thing is there are some things that I find you couldn't do any other way. I mean, it's different if you're using a tablet and a stylus. That's
right.
Cool. I understand that, and I wish I did that more, to be honest. But if you're doing some typography, some calligraphy, that's something that for me that comes straight from the brain through the heart to the hand, hopefully anyway. There's something I was going to say. I don't know if we get the opportunity, if I get the opportunity to just run through a few pieces of work and talk them through a little bit.
Definitely.
But there's one I'm trying to find here now, which is a job we did for Paul McCartney, Sir Paul, I should say, about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago now, I guess. It was an album called Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. And it's another one of those where you look at it and you think, well, what did you do? You just chose a photograph, and it's a photograph of Paul when he was 16 years old, taken by his older brother, Mike.
Oh, wow.
And but it's something that was in the back of my mind. And one of the things I wanted to do for Paul McCartney, which I can't remember him having for a long time, was it was like a logo. And it's such a privilege to work for people like him. And I like the idea of chaos and creation, sort of two complete opposites, something really ordered and something completely anarchic, and yet the two can work together. And so I was trying to come up with an ambigram sort of logo, which is one of those things that can be read backwards and forwards and all that kind of thing. And it's a little a hobby of mine, if you like. I always think when I'm designing a logo, I wonder if this could work as a back to front kind of thing. But it's an ambigram, and it's, you know, it's so many hours of crafting things to see if they can work upside down as well as the other way around. There's no way I can imagine doing that on a computer. To me, it's about your hand skill. That's the long answer to your question.
Well, when it comes to the color choices after you sketch the design that you're looking for, at what point does the computer take over in the design?
Oh, in my hands, never. The computer for me, the most powerful thing the computer does for me personally is in Photoshop, if I'm retouching or creating something or layering things and trying it. Even if the computer ends up kind of being responsible for something happening, it's still trial and error for me. I don't try and let the computer dictate to me. You know, I love computers, and in fact, years ago, I was doing some work with Storm Thorgerson, Spencer. Well, we did quite a bit of work together, and he was doing one of his books, one of his many books about album design, and he wanted to do a chapter, an article about how computers have changed everyone's life. But he said to me, I want you to write it, because I don't use computers, so I don't know how they've changed my life, except that other people do lots of the work, you know, for me now, which was very true, because we'd been doing the design work for some of his, you know, repackaging, Dark Side of the Moon and things like that. and I love collaborating with him because he was such an amazing, godfather of whatever. But to sit down and write to someone else's brief how the computer has changed your life as a designer, I suddenly realized that there were huge amounts of positive and negative, and they balance each other out. But you couldn't work without them anymore. And I tell you, I wouldn't go back to the dark old days of sitting there with a scalpel and glue. It would drive me to distraction.
Hey, Rob, you know about hypnosis? What really I knew Storm also, and we were pretty good friends actually. And his book Walk Away Renee about concepts in hypnosis, a great book to get. But in those days there was no computer. But you know this hypnosis, when they put out an album cover, looked like it was computerized, but it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? It was put together really beautifully, but it looked like but they didn't have computer, right? Which made it even more magical.
Well, I think one of Storm's great assets was that he was able to talk people into spending a lot of money, and he used some of the best retouchers in the country who up until then were working on major budget advertising campaigns, and he'd have to talk to those guys and say, can you work at much lower rate to do something for a record cover? And it's just unheard of. But, he'd spend thousands of pounds in the 70s and 80s getting people to do photo composite work without computers that literally cost a fortune. And he'd very invariably get, in the days when there was, an average budget for an album cover was a couple of £1,000s, he'd spend 30 or 40 and spend a lot and end up not making any profit at all.
That's what he told me.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. He went beyond the budget a lot.
He
himself. And
he told me, I interviewed him about one of his books, and he said the same thing. He goes, "Oh, I'm not making any money on this. I put it all into creating the book." I forget which one it was. But now, when you talk about these album covers, and what I find really interesting, intriguing, whatever word you want to use, and going back to the knowledge again, we're back here where we're talking. It's got that deco look to it. How do you put that together? Do you use paint? Do you use cells? I mean,
this is
the directions here.
Well, this is a good example of trying to do something that we probably should have spent more money on. But in this day and age, the budgets are not quite as generous as they were. And having had the idea approved, then you've got to be quite resourceful. So we actually licensed at very low cost some existing imagery and redrew them slightly to do the things we wanted. Some pictures some images are copyright free, and then it's just composited in Photoshop. So in an ideal world, you'd like to say to one illustrator, this is our idea, all the women, jumping off the diving board and from the brain and all that business. This is what we want. Here's the sketch, and give the budget to the illustrator to do it. But the reality was that we had to do it all in house. And so sometimes that adversity, if you like, forces you into doing things that you wouldn't otherwise do, really.
And then when you want to actually make the album, and I know Spencer has some more questions, but see, the more I start to look and see, the more questions it generates, right?
Sure.
How do you take those images and how do they get printed onto whatever the surface is? Is it, what kind of printers do you use? I mean, are there limits to color? I mean, what goes on in it?
We funny talking to Spencer. Spencer and I have been talking to each other in the last year or two because he very kindly invited me if I wanted to be one of the judges on the Making Vinyl Design Awards, and that really focuses very strongly on print techniques, and it's very, very, I have to say, and I'm sure Spencer will agree, that's very unfashionable in a way. It's only the recent interest in vinyl, the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe, that people are interested in special print effects, and the other side of the market where you've got music being reissued, repackaged, box sets, etc., where people they're spending 50 quid now. They're not spending 5 quid on a record. They're spending big money for 100, whatever it is. And they want the cosmetic quality, the stuff you expect from a fragrance or something. So they're now going to really good printers and pushing them and saying, what can you give us? And I've lost that pleasure in a way over the years, because our industry went from designing a mini poster down to something that's in the corner of your computer screen, which in some ways is a good discipline. In other ways, it means you miss all that lovely tactile stuff, kind of down market in a way, tactile.
Wow.
This was something for Cooler Shaker. It was their last album.
Wow.
So it was, this was really, again, a very budget conscious way of creating something that added a little bit of something special. That's where there's nothing really special about that. It's a single color screen printed onto, it's a pizza box basically.
Right.
It's the idea really. And then this is typical sort of 4-color printing with a UV gloss varnish. This is one of the projects actually I was interested in telling you a bit of a case study if you were interested in this. And yeah, the rest of it is typical. There's nothing extraordinary about the design. What was nice about this, I'm going off the subject a little bit here, Zach, was that this cover, again, a beautiful illustration that we commissioned by a lady called Kate Bailey. And Kate gave us the rights to be able to do what we wanted with the illustration after the cover was printed. I mean, that was the arrangement. And the band came up with an idea of doing a special format which had every single song was given a songbook, a song sheet. So you've got the guitar tabs, the lyrics, the whole thing. And all of these designs were actually put together based on Kate's original image.
Wow.
And so it was a great job for Mark, who works for me here, to create something brand new. I mean, they all look very retro. They're quite vintage, these
Beautiful. Beautiful art.
That is a genius idea of putting the music sheets in the for each song. I love that.
Well, it's one of those things that I think the bands themselves having to learn how to give value for money without spending a load of money, and I kind of admire that resourcefulness. There's a thin line between being resourceful and just being tight-fisted, I must admit. But
in that case, what they've done is they can introduce their music to a bunch of kids. Now they have the music sheet in front of them, and they can play the songs that they're hearing on the album. I think that's brilliant. Spencer, what's your take on that? I've never seen that
think
before.
It's a beautiful series of illustration and art. I agree with you, Zach. I think it's a very conceptual, out-of-the-box idea, first of all. And second of all, I love the artwork and the artwork and all the pieces and putting it all together in that form. It's very beautiful, Rob.
I mean, the other thing is for us with working with a band like this is that this is just like the cherry on the top, because we'd already worked for them for so many years and stuff, and this was them coming back and saying, okay, we're making an album. Their first album was called K, and this is called K 2.0. And they had various other things they wanted to do, like shoot a video. I did a photo shoot with them. I shot 2 tracks in a recording studio to make very low budget videos for them. And but it means that despite the fact there's not a huge amount of money to spend, if you're spending it all with one company who are sort of multidisciplinary, which we are. We're small, but we're multidisciplinary, and we can do TV advertising, and we can do animated digital marketing and all that kind of thing. And it's great to be able to do that and not have huge overheads. So we can offer that to a company to a band like Cooler Shaker, And they get, very close. Crispy Mills, who's the front man of Kula Shaker, knows us very well, and he comes and sits next to us while we're editing the video and all that kind of thing. And not at the moment, obviously, no one sits next to me, not in the days of coronavirus, except my wife. But you know what I mean. It's sometimes the collaboration between you and the artist is going to give you something that you're never going to get any other way, really.
Right, I agree.
Spencer, what was that one question that you've always wanted to ask Rob but never got around to asking?
Well, in fact, Zach, you're so smart because psychically Rob answered it. It was about it's about the Making Vinyl event. It's about the Making Vinyl event that I'm a part of every year as a judge in album packaging, and I brought Rob in because I thought of his expertise at one time, which is thank you very much, Rob. But that event is really into the vinyl resurgence area, and we're talking about that. Like this year, there were over 220 entries, and I got to tell you, the printing, the record, from the record on to the packaging was out of the box in many of them, and like Rob was saying, incredible. It was like you remember, Rob, in the 70s, it was all that die cut album covers and the Rod Stewart whiskey glass, physical graffiti, die cut windows. So it's like that now. Believe it or not, people think, well, but it's not like that. It's like really intricate album packaging, special papers, special. It's incredible what's going on now.
This is my response to that is really strange because I just got my head round a few years ago the fact that we were being sold something that was less than perfect. Like you're saying, the 70s and the 80s, all those things were fantastic, and as time went on, things became normalized and mediocre, and no one, the printers, the print production people, the print buyers, all the people in the record companies didn't want to spend any money, and in fact some of them were rubbing their hands with glee when the download boom happened and they didn't have to worry too much about physical product anymore. And now the industry's gone not full circle, because I think when people release a record on an album on vinyl now, they're sometimes only pressing a couple of thousand. It's a kind of a token thing, but at the same time, it's important to say it's a craft. It's not just something you toss out and it's here's your 10 tracks. Get on and listen to them. There's more to it than that now, and it irritates me immensely if I download an album by a band, even the band I like, and I can't even find out who's playing the bass in the band. And where's my information? Where's my pictures? Where's my lyrics? And I'm not going to go hunting them online. So to see beautifully crafted, printed packaging again is really something special. But I don't hanker for it. I'm not a nostalgist in that respect. I like to see progress.
Yes, vinyl is a big time industry and people want value. And you guys now have to outdo yourself trying to be really creative to justify the price tag. So there's that aspect. And what you just saw us with that pizza box design and the inserts and the music, it's like you were able to balance that out very well. So go ahead and show us this.
Yeah, no, the reason I'm bringing this, I think showing this is, I don't know when this was, in the 90s, 96. This was a band called Octopus. They were also on Food Records. So they were on the, you can see it's our last sample. This is like, do not steal this. So they were on the same label as Blur, Jesus Jones and what have you, and they were a kind of psychedelic pop band from Liverpool, and their idea was, I think it was called From A to B, and that was their title. I said, what does it mean? They didn't really know. I don't really know what it means. It's like just a journey of life. You're going from one place to another, and we ended up with this thing, which is
cool. Wow.
This is a board game. Which was
that's incredible.
Invented the board game From A to B, and we finessed it to the point where I was sort of doing black and white runouts of the board, And in those days, my parents were alive, and I remember sitting there one Sunday afternoon with all the pieces all cut out, and we played this game, and it took 45 minutes to play this game, which is exactly the same length as the album takes.
I knew you were going to say it was 45 minutes of music.
Great.
That's
Yeah, I love
actually pretty
that.
brilliant. Now, let me ask you a question. Did it take you 45 minutes to come up with the time?
I can't. I honestly can't remember how much money we lost on that project, but it was just one of those things that became a labor of love, and we got to work with one of our favorite illustrators to do that, to draw that board game, a guy called Mick Brownfield, who's a complete veteran and a real gentleman, a fantastic artist. So it's really good to do. Unfortunately, the band didn't really hit. It didn't work for them. Such a shame. But that's by the way, in one of the design projects that features in this book, which is having its 20th birthday at this very minute.
Congratulations!
This is a book of that we were offered back in 2001 by Gestalten, the German publisher, and it was a kind of a potted history of the design work we'd done up until then, really. So it's kind of this is so wrong trying to open a book.
No, but it's okay. You know, people, can they buy the book? Can someone buy the book?
It's out of print, but you can buy it on Amazon.
All right, so there you go. What's the name of the book? If someone really
it's called Delicious.
Right.
The design and art direction of Stylorouge.
Oh wow.
Of course, it's before we made videos and things like that, so it doesn't include anything beyond print stuff. And the cover is from it was actually part of a photo shoot we did for the band Jesus Jones again. They seem to get a lot of name checks in this thing. But can I show you something about Jesus Jones?
This is show us whatever you want. I remember meeting Jesus Jones, at HTG in Eatontown, New Jersey, right around circa 1990. Right here, right now was out.
They're a great band, and they keep coming back. Actually, funny enough, I do a bit of music promotion as well, live promotion, and before the coronavirus hit, we were talking about booking them on their next tour to play in one of our local venues here. Okay, so this is an album called Perverse by Jesus Jones, and again, it's one of those albums that we didn't know what it was going to be called, and when they came up with the title, they weren't really sure why they called it Perverse, and we sat down and between us discussed what we should do, and we actually were trying to work out what the word perverse means, because your immediate reaction is that it's something rather sordid and unpleasant, but really it's just that you're living outside the conformed norm, and it could be for all kinds of reasons. So we actually wanted to play with that a little bit. This is very much the distilled down, rather punked up version of what we really wanted for the cover. Such is the nature of the involvement of a manager. But this is the picture that we probably would have preferred to be a cover. So what we set up here was a sort of fantasy, fictitious kind of scenario where every time you move back in this picture, away from this picture, it tells a different story. So at the very front one, you're really not sure what's going on. The next picture you see inside is this one where these two guys appear to be a couple of Mexican wrestlers. We actually photographed this with a Japanese photographer called Takashi Homa, who is an art photographer now, but he was wanting to be a fashion guy, and he was spending some time in London, and it was a great opportunity for us to get him involved in this job. We were in someone's house in southwest London. We found a couple who were English dad and a Mexican mum. So there was a lot of Mexican references inside the house, a very simple terraced house. And we set this all up in here. So these two guys are actually, they're amateur weightlifters at a local gym, but they're dressed up as Mexican wrestlers. And when you pull back, the story changes because they're kind of holding hands. You don't know what the relationship is. you pull back a little bit more. There's a couple of women in there. They could be showgirls or whatever they might be. And then you've got this camera on a tripod. So they're obviously waiting for the photograph to be taken. And what I liked about this, it was almost like a moving image in a movie. It's almost like a pullback, a track away. So the more you reveal, the more questions there are to be answered, really. Right. And then you go back a little bit further, and then you're outside the window. So all this is going on inside this little room, which you weren't aware of. And then final shot, there's this thing outside, which is a Filipino bus, a jitney, which we happened to hire. It's one of those kind of crazy things where there was enough money in the budget to be able to do something really unusual. And we weren't sure where we were going, but it was just one of those things that became seminal for us. Since then, we've done a few of these things where you make a series of still images, almost like a movie shot. But that was just an example of one of those jobs that really gave us lots of fulfillment, as well as giving the band something that they liked as well.
The photography on that series is really amazing. It's almost like what I thought a couple of those pictures could have been the cover also, you know, Rob? I mean, there were extraordinary photographs. Extraordinary.
Thank you. There's something about them that I was always a big fan of Diane Arbus, and there's something about that peculiar, the perversity of it is, but there's a normality. I mean, I love the way she celebrated normal people, but in such a way that made you feel that you were in a dream of some sort. Right. And we were also very influenced by Diane Arbus's work when we were doing the cover for the Rolling Stones album, No Security, because we like the idea of using ordinary people on the cover rather than the Stones themselves. That's it, Patrick. Hey, look at you.
There you go.
So that's the album.
That was the concept. There was, I mean, there were half a dozen concepts that we showed the band, but this is the one that Mick Jagger particularly really liked, and so for that we ended up hiring Zed Nelson, who's very much a news photographer. He's an editorial features photographer. Some hard-hitting stuff in his portfolio. Nothing very glamorous or commercial at all. And he and I flew out to a couple of the gigs that the Stones were doing in Europe, one in Vienna and one in Munich, I think. And for those two gigs, we actually set up a little platform that was about 2 foot higher than ground level, so that people could come and have their photograph taken dressed as Rolling Stones fans. Well, they were Rolling Stones fans. They were at the gig. And the scene behind them hopefully told the story without having any reference to the band themselves, apart from the logo on the T-shirt. So, we must have shot about 50 or 60 couples.
Really?
And just, chose the best ones. What we thought was the best one.
Well, no, I think it was good because I don't know whether they're fans or they're roadies, and that's kind of keep you guessing a little bit in the photography. You can go to stylerouge.co.uk and see the amazing work from Rob O'Connor, and there's videos there. There's I mean, this is a great site. Who put that together? I mean, it's a masterpiece. The website itself is a masterpiece.
I think that's very kind of you. We were quite early to get into websites. When websites became like something that you should really do, we had an enormous studio with lots of tenants taking various offices, and one of the companies was a couple of guys called Motion Pixels, and they were dead keen to do a great website for us. And I think this was early 90s, so they threw everything at it, and ever since then it set the bar rather high for us. So we've always liked a nice website. It's not so glamorous now, but it I think it's very important. It's up to date. And of
Well,
course,
I mean, if you're going to do it well, because
Yeah.
that's your calling card, and that's how you're going to get business. So if you're listening and
Yeah.
you're watching, use some of this free advice. It's a good idea to implement in your business plan. If you're an artist, you got to find some good designers to work with. Spencer, what are the top 3 qualities of design that you look for? And then Rob, the same question.
I mean, I look kind of a hard question. Everybody's has a different style or a different feeling. As long as the treatment of typography combines with the visuality into some an incredible, well done, I don't know how to word this, well done quality graphic format, that to me is the end result. And like I said, it's hard to teach typography. I mean, I was blessed to be schooled at the Yale Design, so I had an incredible background in type, and I was able to work with David Byrd from RISD because it's the same schooling with the Joseph Albers Foundation of Color and stuff like that, and type with Norman Ives and the whole thing. But you've got to have that combination, typography with the visuality. I don't know how to well express it. And just have that together. Rob, anything to add to that, or your view?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer that question from the point of view of someone who's been an employer over many years, and that's, the kind of designers that I've always wanted to employ. Generally, they have to be. I know this sounds very what's the word? I can't think of the right word. Presbyterian of me. I don't know. They've got to be hard workers. I want someone who's going to be dedicated to what they're doing and not be messing around. The other thing is, I think, versatility, because as we've already discussed, you never know what the next job's going to throw at you, and you've suddenly got to put on a different hat, wear a different outfit, become a different person. You can't just do your thing all the time. I mean, you can as an independent, but if you're part of an organization, a company, you've got to be pretty versatile. And I just think there's that expression about perspiration and inspiration, and it's how much of what you do is hard work and how much is really just from the muse. And I just think sometimes people come with ideas that you just think, where the hell did that come from? And there's no knowing where people's ideas come from, but when they're right. So we've been lucky. We've had some great people work for Stylorouge, and we still do. I think that's probably.
We definitely love what you do, Robert O'Connor, and we do appreciate your time today. And Spencer, thank you very much. This is probably one of the most interesting discussions we've ever had about design. We really dug into the meat of the matter, and it got so far as we're talking about brightness and contrast and all of those things that make art so great. So thank you very much. Spencer, you're the guy that's going to take us out today.
Well, thanks a lot, Zach, Pat, and Rob, of course. And we'll be continuing this series of great music designers in our HDTV series. We're looking forward to that. And I want to say the best to all. And we're off on the show.
I was talking about Instagram. So Instagram for me has just become this way of sharpening the saw, I think, as an expression, just to keep yourself alert and keep your creative juices tip top. And I found it really useful the last 4 or 5 years, just by always having the phone. You've always got a camera, and to me that's an amazing thing, because I do take photographs as well, and I love the whole process of photographing people. But when I'm out, like all of you guys probably do the same, I'll photograph any kind of stuff. I mean, crazy stuff. And if I'm in London on my way to a meeting, I'll deliberately now go a bit early, so that I can take an alternative route to where I'm meeting someone, just so I can see new stuff. And it's become a real it's just a lovely discipline to witness new stuff, and taking photographs of it is a great way of, I don't know, I never thought I would have got into social in any way, but I'll just show you this thing.